Hello, I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico, and this is New Mexico History in 10 minutes. I want to talk about New Mexico in the late 1700s and also about New Mexico's place in the broader Spanish Empire. So, let's talk about Spain for a minute. From the 1500s to the end of the 1600s, Spain was ruled by the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs ruled the Spanish Empire, including New Mexico. But that came to an end in the year 1700 when King Charles, called Carlos el Hechizado, Charles the Bewitched, died again in 1700. He was called the Bewitched because he was twisted in mind and body because of the inbreeding that had taken place in the royal families that were his ancestors. So the next family or dynasty to rule Spain were the Bourbons of France. They were a lot more strict than the Habsburgs. And you could say that in this period of the 1700s, this is when Spain's empire really starts to unravel. Starting in 1492, Spain became the power of Europe and a world dominating entity with the most powerful army and navy and economy. But that starts to even get shaken in 1588 when Spain's Armada was defeated by the British. And this is a difficult situation. It really cracks Spain's confidence, but she still keeps going. New Mexico was colonized and becomes part of that empire. Well, if we look at the late 1700s in New Mexico, what you see is that we've evolved and changed over the course of a couple of centuries. For example, two censuses were taken, one in 1750 and one in 1790, and we get a good idea of what the people were like here. The casta or caste system was heavily represented in that 1750 census, with people being designated as españoles and castizos and mestizos and mulattos and coyotes, all kinds of mixes of people. By 1790, it seems to kind of smooth out. And it's not that there's a lot of people coming into New Mexico. There aren't. What happens is New Mexicans are marrying each other. They're marrying native peoples. They're really mixing so that you tend to get a population that is more truly mestizo or mixed than it was segregated about 40 years before. You just have to look at the census records to see this. Something else is happening. If we look at what's going on in the United States, there's a revolution, American Revolution in 1776, and then in Europe, the French have a revolution in 1789. The lower classes, the peasants, revolt against the three estates, the church, the nobility, and monarchy, and they are tired of paying all the taxes while the wealthy classes pay almost no taxes but live much better and have food while the poor people are starving. This is a bread war. Like a lot of revolutions, it starts because the people had no food, they had no bread. So this sends an earthquake across Europe. And in New Mexico, it's interesting, in around the year 1780, a tax is imposed on the Nuevo Mexicanos to help pay the Americans, to help them fight their revolution against Spain's enemy, the British. So our Hispano Nuevo Mexicano ancestors, the men had to pay 2 pesos, and the Native American men paid 1 peso to contribute to the American Revolution. So we were in there at the beginning, and so were the Mexican people, because they were also paying this tax to help the Americans fight for their independence. So this is an interesting side note in our history here in New Mexico. Also, I want you to think about something. In the late 1700s and early 1800s in New Mexico, this is where we really start to develop what we truly call Nuevo Mexicano culture, because what we see happening is the growth of the development of certain things that are considered truly New Mexican, but also have roots in other parts of the world, like the penitentes, the hermanos penitentes, our Santero tradition, our Spanish language, and our foodways. If you look at the 1700s, there was a guy who came here in the 1740s named Bernardo Miera y Pacheco. He was from northern Spain. He makes his way to Mexico, then to northern Mexico, then to New Mexico. And he marries down in what's now the state of Chihuahua, but he comes up here with his wife, who was a Dominguez de Mendoza family member, an old New Mexican family. And he is quite a guy. He's an engineer, he's a cartographer, a map maker, he's a santero, he carves and paints saints. His engineering career didn't go all that well, but he does quite amazing things with paintings and with carving saints. We know that his training certainly had elements of the Renaissance with perspective and depth and the use of shading and colors. So what we find out is that some of our santos from the late 1700s were made by this guy. There was also a priest, that priest at Abiquiu during the witch craze, Fray Juan Jose Toledo. He also carved saints. We know because Fray Atanasio Dominguez commented on his saint making in his report from 1776, and he said that Father Toledo had carved a saint that was really ugly. So he did not get much kudos from Dominguez, but we do know that Miera y Pacheco was a very high-level artist, a high-level painter and santero, and he's one of the first to really introduce this as a local tradition. But we'll see, his high-level painting really is the last of that kind as we get into the 1800s, and the style of painting and carving saints in New Mexico changes with contact with Pueblo art styles and techniques. But if you want to see an amazing example of Miera y Pacheco's church religious work, go to the Cristo Rey Church at the end of Canyon Road in Santa Fe, and you'll see his stone altar. It's still there. The paint is all gone, but it's quite an amazing work of art. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it's the late 1700s and early 1800s that New Mexico really starts to come into her own as a cultural entity. Of course, we have 2 centuries of Spaniards and Portuguese people and French people mingling with Pueblo people and Genízaro people and Mexican Indians and African people. So this is the stew that's been cooking over 200 years, and it's finally coming into its own when we get to the early 1800s. When I talk to you next, there's a couple of people we need to look at because they're very indicative of New Mexico in that period from, say, 1800 to 1820. One will show us a glimpse into New Mexico's future when Zebulon Pike accidentally, or not so accidentally, makes his way into New Mexico, Spain's northern frontier. And then Pedro Pino represents New Mexico at the Spanish Cortes in 1811 to 1812. He'll show us a romantic past about New Mexico that still is with us, but it shows the 2 different views and perspectives that are really fascinating. Also, I'll be talking about Chimayo and its major contribution to New Mexico culture, New Mexico religious history and development and evolution. So that's it for now. Thank you for staying here with me. I'm Robert Martinez. Take care. Adios. Goodbye.